You think you know Steve Jobs, the black turtleneck, the iPhone reveal, the genius who changed the world. But what if I told you that the man who built Apple wasn't even passionate about computers? What if the greatest origin story in tech was actually about a college dropout who stumbled into the computer business almost by accident? This is the story you've never heard. The story of Stephen Paul Jobs before he became Steve Jobs, because sometimes the truth is more fascinating than the legend. February 24th, 1955. San Francisco. A young graduate student, Joanne Schiebel, welcomes a baby boy into the world. She loves him deeply from the moment she sees him. But life has placed her in a complicated moment. She wants her son to have every opportunity, every bit of stability and support she can possibly give. And so, with a heart full of hope for his future, she chooses a path she believes will give him the best start in life. A wonderful couple had planned to adopt him, but destiny had other ideas. Plans shifted, and suddenly the future was open again. That's when Paul and Clara Jobs entered his story. They were warm, hardworking, and had been dreaming of becoming parents. The moment they heard about the baby boy, they felt a connection, as if life had been saving this moment just for them. Joanne cared very much about the kind of life her son would grow up to live, and when Paul and Clara promised they would give him every chance, including a college education if he wanted it, she felt peace in her heart. She believed he would be surrounded by love. And so, Stephen Paul Jobs went home with the parents who cherished him every single day. As a child, Steve always knew he was adopted, not as a secret, but as a story of love repeating itself. One day, when he was 6, a neighborhood girl asked him a question that confused him. He ran home upset, and Paul and Clara gently gathered him close to explain something they both believed deeply. "We chose you. We wanted you. You were our gift." Those words stayed with him for life. They shaped him. They gave him confidence, curiosity, and a feeling that he mattered. Maybe that was the spark, the quiet, glowing belief in his heart that he was meant to do something special. Not because he was abandoned, but because he was loved twice. First by someone who wanted the very best for him, and then by the family who raised him with devotion. The unlikely rebel. The Jobs family moved to Mountain View, California, right in the heart of what would become Silicon Valley. Paul Jobs worked in a garage, tinkering with cars. He gave young Steve his own workbench and told him, "This is yours." Steve wasn't interested in cars, but he loved watching his father work. Paul taught him something crucial. When you're a craftsman, you care about the back of the fence as much as the front. Even the parts you can't see matter. That lesson, it would define every Apple product decades later. But school? That was a different story. Steve was brilliant and bored. He was a prankster, a troublemaker. He later admitted, "If it wasn't for one teacher, Mrs. Hill in 4th grade, I would have absolutely ended up in jail. She bribed him with candy and money to do math problems." It worked. He went from chaos to straight as, still by middle school, he was getting bullied and barely surviving. He told his parents, "I'm not going back." So they moved. They couldn't afford it, but they did it anyway. They mortgaged everything to move to Los Altos, to better schools, to give Steve a chance. High school was where something shifted. He started going to Hewlett-Packard lectures after school. He met other kids obsessed with electronics. One of them was a guy named Bill Fernandez. And Bill introduced Steve to someone who would change everything, a nerdy, brilliant engineer 5 years older than him. His name was Steve Wozniak. The dropout who went to India. In 1972, Steve graduates high school and heads to Reed College in Portland. His parents had promised his birth mother he'd go to college, and they kept that promise, even though tuition cost their entire life savings. But Steve lasted exactly 1 semester. 6 months. He dropped out. Why? "I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I couldn't see how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all the money my parents had saved their entire life." He felt guilty. But here's the twist. He didn't leave campus. He crashed on friends' floors for another 18 months, sneaking into classes that actually interested him. No credits, no grades, just curiosity. Point one of those classes? Calligraphy. He He learned about serif fonts, spacing, typography. It seemed completely useless at the time. But a decade later, it would make the Macintosh the first computer with beautiful typefaces. By 1974, Steve was back in California, broke and aimless. He needed money. So he walked into Atari, the hottest gaming company in the world, and basically refused to leave until they hired him. He was 19, unwashed, intense. The engineers couldn't stand him. Atari put him on the night shift. Alone, because nobody wanted to work with him. His job? Soldering resistors onto circuit boards. That's it. He wasn't designing games. He wasn't creating anything revolutionary. He was a technician, and he hated it. After just 5 months, he told his boss, "I'm quitting. I'm going to India to find enlightenment." His boss made him a deal. "Fix a problem in Germany for us first, and we'll pay for your flight." So Steve Jobs flew to Germany, fixed some power supplies, then hitchhiked to India with a college friend. He visited temples. He shaved his head. He came back months later wearing Indian clothes, practicing Buddhism, convinced he'd found some deeper meaning. But he was still broke, and he still had no idea what to do with his life. The accidental entrepreneur. Here's what most people don't know. Steve Jobs wasn't passionate about computers. Not really. Wozniak? He was obsessed. He'd stay up all night designing circuits just to show off at the Homebrew Computer Club, a gathering of nerds trading computer parts in someone's garage. Wozniak built computers for the pure joy of it, for the art of engineering. He once said, "I wanted other engineers to say, 'Wow, how did he do that?'" Jobs would sometimes tag along to these meetings. But he wasn't there for the engineering. He was there because he saw something nobody else did. In 1976, Wozniak built something special, a computer you could actually afford. He called it the Apple I. It wasn't much, just a circuit board, but it was elegant, brilliant. And Wozniak's plan? Give the designs away for free. Share them with the world. Jobs looked at him like he was insane. "Are you kidding? We should start a company and sell these." Wozniak didn't want to. He was happy at his job at Hewlett-Packard. He didn't care about business. But Jobs wouldn't let it go. He kept pushing. He sold his Volkswagen van. Wozniak sold his beloved HP calculator. They scraped together just enough money to build the first circuit boards in Jobs' parents' garage. And here's the crucial part. Jobs didn't build a single thing. According to Wozniak, Steve Jobs played no role at all in any of my designs of the Apple I and Apple II computer. He did not know technology. He never designed anything as a hardware engineer, and he didn't know software. He wanted to be important, and important people are always the business people. Jobs couldn't code. He couldn't engineer, but he could sell. He walked into a local computer store called the Byte Shop and convinced the owner to order 50 computers for $50,000. The owner had one condition. They had to be fully assembled, not kits. Jobs was 21 years old and just landed a deal worth more than most people made in a year. He had no factory, no employees, no money to buy parts. So he walked into an electronics supplier and talked them into giving him 30 days credit. He told them, "I have this purchase order. If you give me the parts, I'll build the computers, sell them, and pay you back before the 30 days are up." They said yes. And Jobs and Wozniak worked day and night in that garage, stuffing chips on his circuit boards, testing them, delivering them. They made it. Just barely. That's when Jobs realized something. This wasn't about computers. This was about building something that mattered, about being important, about proving to the world, and maybe to himself, that he wasn't just some kid who'd been given away. The truth about passion. So here's the part nobody talks about. Steve Jobs didn't start Apple because he was passionate about computers. He started Apple because he was passionate about success, about business, about building something that would make him important. Wozniak later said, "Sometimes motivation, wanting something, is a lot more important than having the real skill." Jobs learned marketing because he wasn't good at engineering. He learned how to communicate because he couldn't code. He developed his famous reality distortion field because he needed other people to build his vision for him. The calligraphy class, the India trip, the Atari job, none of it was a master plan. He was a college dropout stumbling through his early 20s, trying to figure out who he was. He worked at Atari not because he loved video games, but because he needed money for a spiritual journey. He sold computer kits not because he was passionate about technology, but because he saw a business opportunity. And that's actually the more powerful story. Because Jobs proves something most success gurus won't tell you. You don't need to follow your passion. Sometimes your passion finds you. Sometimes you stumble into the thing you're meant to do. Jobs wasn't destined to revolutionize personal computing. He was a directionless kid who happened to be in the right place, with the right person at the right time. And he was smart enough, hungry enough, to recognize the opportunity. The legend of Steve Jobs is the guy in the black turtleneck launching the iPhone. But the truth of Steve Jobs is the adopted kid who worked the night shift at Atari, sold his van to start a company, and convinced the world he was a genius even though he couldn't code a single line. That's not a story about passion. That's a story about relentless drive, about seeing what others missed, about refusing to stay small. Before Apple, Steve Jobs was nobody. A college dropout, a technician, a kid searching for meaning in all the wrong places. And then he became everyone. What's one opportunity you've been ignoring? Drop it in the comments. And if this changed how you see success, hit subscribe, because there are more untold stories coming.